It was supposed to be just another frozen February night in the Colorado mountains. But at exactly 11:47 p.m., Brenda Jones's security system lit up with an alert that made no sense. Her cameras flickered on. Something small was moving through the blizzard outside her cabin. She leaned closer to the screen, squinting through the static and swirling snow. Then she saw it. A second shape. Larger. Moving with a silence that didn't belong in these woods. Brenda's breath caught. Bears didn't move like that. Wolves traveled in packs. This was something else entirely. Before she could grab her phone, Rusty appeared on the monitor. Her orange tabby cat stood completely still in the driveway, ears flat, tail low. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was positioning himself between the cabin and whatever was coming out of the darkness. "Rusty, get inside," Brenda whispered at the screen. The larger shape stepped into the edge of the porch light. Brenda's hand flew to her mouth. A black panther, hurt, struggling in the snow mere feet from her door. And behind it, still barely visible, was something even smaller. A cub. Shaking violently. No one who saw the footage later could believe what happened next. Rusty didn't run. He moved forward, slowly, deliberately. He pressed his small body against the freezing cub as it fell, using his own warmth to keep it alive. The adult panther grew completely still. Within seconds, the entire scene became chaos. Brenda threw open the door, barefoot, shouting into the storm. The wind tore at her clothes. The cub was limp in her arms. Rusty refused to leave its side, even as she carried it inside. Was the cub fading? How did a black panther end up in Colorado in the middle of winter? And why was her house cat acting like he had been waiting for this moment his entire life? What happened over the next 3 years left wildlife experts speechless and turned this ordinary tabby cat into the center of a story no one saw coming. But before we go any further, hit that like button and subscribe, because you're not going to want to miss what happens when this panther grows up. Seriously, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country in the comments. I want to know how far this story reaches. The cold hit Brenda like a wall the second she opened the door. Snow whipped sideways, cutting into her bare arms and legs. She hadn't bothered with shoes, hadn't grabbed a coat. There wasn't time. The cub was barely moving. She stumbled through the drifts, her feet already numb, and dropped to her knees beside the small black shape in the snow. Up close, it was worse than she'd thought. Clear signs of distress showed along its side. One ear showed signs of frost. Its breathing came in shallow, uneven pulls that sounded wrong. Too quiet. Too slow. Rusty was pressed against the cub's chest, his orange fur already soaked through with melted snow. He looked up at Brenda with eyes that said one thing: help him. She reached down, her hands shaking so violently she almost couldn't grip. The cub's body was ice cold and heavier than she expected. When she lifted it, its head lolled to the side. Cold dampness marked her shirt. For a second, pure panic froze her in place. This wasn't a kitten. This was a wild animal. A predator. What was she doing? Then Rusty bolted ahead toward the door, glancing back as if to say, "Move." Brenda ran. Inside, the warmth of the cabin felt like a slap. She kicked the door shut and laid the cub on the floor near the fireplace. Its body twitched once, then went still. Too still. "No, no, no," Brenda whispered. She grabbed towels from the bathroom, her mind racing. She'd raised barn cats. She'd helped injured birds. But this was something else entirely. Rusty was already beside the cub, licking its face, slow, deliberate strokes across its closed eyes, across the matted fur. He cleaned the rough patches like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Brenda knelt beside them, wrapping the cub in towels, rubbing its limbs to try to bring warmth back. The cub's breathing was so faint she had to put her ear to its chest just to hear it. 1 beat, 2, then nothing for too long. "Come on," she begged. "Please." She grabbed her phone. No signal. The storm had knocked out the towers. She tried again. Nothing. The nearest wildlife center was 40 minutes away on a good day. In this blizzard? Impossible. They were on their own. Hours crawled by. Brenda kept the fire roaring. She heated water bottles and tucked them around the cub's body. She checked its breathing every few minutes, her heart sinking each time it seemed to slow. Rusty never moved. He stayed curled against the cub's side, his purr a low, steady hum that seemed to fill the room. Around 3 a.m., the cub's eyes cracked open, just barely, yellow-green and unfocused. It tried to lift its head, failed, and let out a sound that was somewhere between a whimper and a call. Rusty touched his nose to the cub's face. The cub went still again, but this time its breathing deepened, steadied. The shallow gasps gave way to something slower, stronger. Brenda exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. She sat back on her heels, staring at the two of them, an orange tabby and a black panther cub, side by side, like it was the most natural thing in the world. But nothing about this was natural. By dawn, the storm was still raging. Brenda checked the cub again, cleaning him as best she could. The affected areas were no longer critical. The cub drank a little water from her hand. Rusty stayed beside him the entire time, grooming him between every sip. It was around 7 a.m. when Brenda heard it. Faint at first, distant, then louder. Sirens. She froze, her hand still resting on the cub's back. The sound grew closer, cutting through the wind. Multiple vehicles, moving slow but deliberate, searching. Her stomach dropped. Someone was looking for this cub. Rusty lifted his head, ears twitching toward the sound. The cub's eyes opened wider this time, yellow and sharp, alert. The siren stopped. Not far, maybe a mile down the mountain road. Brenda's pulse hammered in her ears. She looked at Rusty, then at the cub, then back toward the window where red and blue lights flickered faintly through the trees. "What do I do?" she whispered. Rusty stood, placing himself between the cub and the door. He wasn't moving, and in that moment Brenda realized neither was she. The sirens faded by mid-morning. Brenda watched through the window as the flashing lights disappeared back down the mountain road. They hadn't come to her door. Not yet. 2 days later, the news broke. A transport truck carrying exotic animals had crashed on Highway 9 during the storm. The driver was in severe distress. Most of the animals were recovered, but one was still missing. A 3-month-old black panther cub. Authorities confirmed the mother was gone. Brenda sat on the couch, her laptop open, staring at the grainy photo on the screen. The cub in the picture looked exactly like the one curled up beside Rusty near the fireplace. She closed the laptop. Her hands felt cold. The cub lifted his head, blinking at her with those yellow-green eyes. Rusty groomed the top of his head, unbothered, unconcerned. Like this was exactly where they were supposed to be. Brenda made a decision that day. She named him Chase, because that's what he'd done. He'd chased life, chased warmth, chased safety through a storm that should have taken him. The first week was a blur of sleepless nights. Chase needed to eat every few hours. Brenda mixed formula, warmed bottles. Rusty stayed close, grooming Chase after every feeding. By the second week, Chase was walking. Stumbling at first, but determined. He followed Rusty everywhere. They slept tangled together in the same spot every night. It was beautiful and terrifying, because Chase was growing fast. By the end of the first month, he doubled in size. His paws were too big for his body. His teeth were already too powerful. When he played with Rusty, he didn't yet understand his own strength. Rusty would hiss, and Chase would back off immediately, ears flat, confused. Brenda started reinforcing the furniture. She replaced the food bowls with stainless steel. By the second month, Chase was the size of a medium dog. His play growls rattled the windows. When he jumped, the floor shook. Rusty still groomed him every morning, still slept beside him every night. But now, Chase's head was bigger than Rusty's entire body. The neighbors started asking questions. "What kind of dog is that? Is that thing legal?" She avoided them, stayed inside, kept the curtains drawn. But the sounds were impossible to hide. Chase's calls grew deeper, louder. When he searched for Rusty, it echoed through the trees. 3 months in, the federal wildlife officials showed up. 2 officers, 1 clipboard, a large transport crate in the back of their truck. "Miss Jones, we have evidence you're housing a classified animal without a permit. We're here to relocate him to a licensed facility." Brenda stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "He'll fade if you take him." "Ma'am, this animal is classified as high risk. It's not safe for you or the community." "He's not dangerous. We have a containment directive. Please step aside." Brenda didn't move. They brought the crate to the porch. Chase was inside, watching from behind Brenda's legs. Rusty was beside him, tail low, ears back. 1 officer gestured toward the crate. "Come on, boy, let's make this easy." Chase didn't move. Rusty stepped forward. He positioned himself directly in front of the crate opening, staring at the officers, daring them to try. "Ma'am, you need to move the cat." "He's not going to move," Brenda said quietly, "and neither is Chase." The second officer leaned forward. Before his hand even got close, Chase let out a sound that shook the air. Not playful, not curious. Something primal, deep, powerful, loud enough to vibrate through the cabin walls. Both officers stepped back. 1 reached for his radio. "We're going to need additional support." Brenda's heart sank. She knelt beside Chase, her hand on his massive head. He was trembling, not from fear, from confusion. He didn't understand why they wanted to take him away. Rusty pressed against Chase's side. He wasn't backing down. 20 minutes later, more officers arrived. Brenda tried to fight it with words. She begged, but in the end it didn't matter. They secured Chase. Rusty cried out, a sound Brenda had never heard him make before. Sharp, unfamiliar. They loaded Chase into the crate and secured the door. As the truck pulled away, Rusty bolted after it. He ran down the driveway through the snow, chasing the red taillights as they disappeared around the bend. Brenda chased after him, screaming his name. By the time she caught up, Rusty had slowed down and collapsed in the middle of the road. Panting, shaking, staring at the empty road where the truck had vanished. She picked him up. He didn't resist. He just went limp in her arms. That night, Rusty sat by the front door, waiting. He sat there the next night, and the night after that. Every single night for the next 3 years, Rusty waited by that door, listening, watching, waiting for Chase to come home, 3 years passed like slow weather through stone. Brenda tried to move forward. She returned to work. She kept the cabin running. But the house felt different now. Quieter. Like a piece of it had been carried away. Rusty never stopped waiting. Every night, without fail, he sat by the front door, sometimes for hours. His eyes fixed on the driveway, his ears lifted at every sound from the woods. Brenda would call his name, coax him with treats, try to distract him with toys. But nothing worked. He'd eat, he'd rest. But the moment the sun went down, he returned to that spot. Waiting for Chase. Brenda contacted the facility monthly at first, then weekly. The replies were always calm and controlled. He's adjusting. He's healthy. No, we can't arrange a visit. It's outside of protocol. By the end of the first year, the tone began to change. He's becoming more difficult to manage. He doesn't respond well to handlers. Miss Jones, you need to understand. He's not the cub you remember. By the second year, calls went unanswered. Brenda turned to the news instead. And then she found it. A short article buried in a professional journal. Captive black panther deemed unsuitable for standard rehabilitation program. The facility didn't name the animal. But Brenda knew. Chase had grown into something they couldn't easily manage. The article described him as unusually large for his species and resistant to standard protocol. Staff members reported feeling uneasy during close contact. The final line of the article settled heavily on Brenda's chest. Officials are considering permanent long-term housing as release may no longer be viable. Permanent housing, a life behind barriers. Brenda closed her laptop and sat in the dark. Rusty was already at the door, staring into the night. "I'm sorry," she whispered. The winters grew harsher. Each season brought heavier snowfall. Power outages became common. The mountain felt more isolated than ever. By the third year, the news about Chase went silent. Then, in late January, the warnings started. Meteorologists predicted one of the strongest winter systems in decades. Emergency services went into preparedness mode. Brenda stocked up on supplies. Rusty stayed by the door. The storm hit on a Friday night. Wind howled, snow stacked high against the walls. The power flickered twice, then went out completely. The radio crackled with emergency broadcasts, road closures, shelter advisories. Then one final update. A facility in Durango had experienced a structural breach due to the storm. Brenda's chest tightened. That's where Chase was. Her phone had no signal. Rusty's ears lifted. He stood staring at the door. Then, outside, heavy footsteps moved through the storm, deliberate, purposeful, heading straight for the cabin. Rusty didn't step back. He leaned forward, waiting. Before we continue, you and most people watching right now might never see another video from this channel. All because you forgot to subscribe. So please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. It is literally the only way you tell me that the hours researching, writing, and editing these stories was worth it. Now, let's get back to the story. The footsteps stopped. Brenda held her breath in the darkness, her hand gripping the flashlight. Outside, the wind howled. Snow struck the windows. But beneath all the noise, she could hear it. Breathing. Slow. Steady. Controlled. Rusty's tail flicked. He didn't retreat. He didn't hesitate. He stood perfectly still, listening to something only he could recognize. Then the sound moved away. The steps faded back into the storm. Brenda exhaled slowly and eased down onto the couch. "What was that?" Rusty returned to his place by the door. The radio came back on as the generator stabilized again. The voice was urgent. "We have confirmation of a wildlife transfer disruption at the Colorado containment facility. One adult black panther is currently outside its designated zone. Specialized recovery units are now active. Residents within the region are advised to remain indoors and avoid contact." Brenda's breath caught. Chase. The broadcast continued. "The situation is being managed under emergency tracking protocols. Movement was detected near mountainous regions." Brenda checked her phone again. Still no signal. She was alone on the mountain in the middle of a blizzard. By morning, the advisory had spread across the state. Schools in the region delayed opening. Local farms were advised to secure animals. Search teams mobilized, but the storm made movement nearly impossible. Experts speculated he'd move toward lower elevations, where conditions were easier. But that's not what happened. For 2 days, there were no confirmed sightings, no footage, nothing. Brenda stayed inside, per protocol. Rusty never left the doorway. He barely ate. Barely slept. On the third night, the motion detector activated. Brenda grabbed her phone and pulled up the camera feed. Snow, wind, darkness. Then a shadow moved across the frame. Large, smooth, controlled. The camera adjusted slightly. Yellow-green eyes reflected the light. Sleek black fur. "Chase." Brenda whispered. "He's here." Rusty was already at the door. His tail lifted. He let out a soft trill, a sound he only ever made for one presence. The steps grew closer, right onto the porch. The news had said he would move toward open areas, but he hadn't. He'd crossed miles of mountain terrain in one of the worst storms on record, and come straight here. Rusty pressed his nose against the glass. From outside came a low, familiar sound. Not a threat, a greeting. Rusty answered. Brenda's hand hovered over the door handle. Chase hadn't come to wander. He hadn't come to search for food. He'd come back. The question was, should she open the door? Would you open that door? Honestly? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you're as hooked as I am, smash that like button and share this story. What happens next will blow your mind. Brenda's hand trembled on the door handle. Every instinct told her to step back, to lock the deadbolt, to wait for outside assistance. But then Chase pressed his massive head against the glass door, not pushing it, not testing it, just resting there. His yellow-green eyes staring through the frosted pane, searching. Rusty went completely still, his ears forward, his pupils wide. And then he did something Brenda never expected. He cried. A desperate, broken sound that sliced through the cabin. He clawed at the door, his small paws scraping frantically against the wood. He wasn't frightened, he was pleading. "Let me out. Let me get to him." Brenda's throat tightened. "Rusty, I don't know if—" But Rusty wasn't listening. He yowled again, louder this time, and Chase answered from the other side, a deep, steady rumble that vibrated through the doorframe. They were communicating, after 3 years apart, separated by distance and systems designed to keep them away from each other. They were communicating. Brenda made her decision. She unlocked the door. The second it cracked open, Rusty shot through the gap like lightning. He didn't hesitate. He dashed straight into the snow, into the storm, directly toward the massive panther standing on the porch. Brenda gasped, stumbling forward. "Rusty, no!" But what happened next made her stop cold. Chase lowered himself, not just his head, his entire body. He pressed himself flat against the snow-covered porch, making himself as small as possible. Passive. Open. Rusty reached him and didn't slow. He ran straight into Chase's face, rubbing his head against the Panther's massive jaw. Chase closed his eyes, his whole body softened with release. Brenda stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. She'd expected hesitation, expected distance, expected the years to have changed everything. But Chase remembered. Rusty climbed onto Chase's head, kneading his paws into the thick black fur, purring so loudly Brenda could hear it over the wind. Chase tilted slightly, giving Rusty access to his neck and ears. The same familiar places Rusty used to groom when Chase was small enough to fit in Brenda's arms. The security camera above the porch recorded every second. Chase slowly rose to his feet, Rusty still perched across his shoulders. The size contrast was overwhelming. Rusty looked tiny beside him, but Chase moved carefully, deliberately, like he was afraid of causing discomfort. Brenda stepped onto the porch, her bare feet sinking into the snow. "Chase?" His head turned toward her. For a moment she saw the cub again, the terrified baby she'd carried inside 3 years ago. He didn't approach her, didn't step forward. He simply watched, waiting. "You came back," Brenda whispered. Chase blinked slowly. Rusty purred louder, grooming the side of Chase's face. And then, from somewhere far off in the storm, Brenda heard it. The rhythmic thump of aircraft blades cutting through the air. Her stomach sank. The alerts, the statewide notice, they were searching. Chase's ears shifted toward the sound. His body tightened. But he didn't flee. He stayed beside Rusty like he couldn't bring himself to leave again. Brenda's thoughts raced. If they found him here, everything would change. The reports had labeled him a safety concern. But standing on her porch, with Rusty stretched across his shoulders, Chase looked like none of those things. The sound grew louder, nearer. "You need to go," Brenda whispered urgently. "Chase, you have to—" But Chase didn't move. Rusty jumped down from his shoulders and padded toward the tree line. He looked back, trilling. "Come on." Chase followed, slowly at first, then quicker. The two of them slipped into the trees just as a wide spotlight passed across the driveway. Brenda stepped back inside and shut the door. Her heart thundered in her chest. She grabbed her phone. Still no signal. The aircraft circled once, then again. The light swept the trees, the cabin, the porch where the fresh paw prints were already being softened by falling snow. Then it moved on. Brenda slid down the wall, breath shaking. They hadn't seen him. Not yet. But she knew they would return. She pulled up the security footage on her laptop. The reunion played back in crisp detail. Rusty racing into the storm, Chase lowering himself. The two of them together again after 3 impossible years. Then her screen flickered. A new emergency alert flashed across the display. Regional response teams are now active in the northern mountain region following a verified sighting. Residents are advised to remain indoors. Operations have intensified. Elevated. Brenda's skin went cold. They weren't just searching anymore. The situation was expanding quickly, and they were moving closer. Brenda didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the tree line, her phone clutched in her hand. The emergency broadcast looped every 20 minutes. Specialized units, containment protocols, secure the animal. She kept checking the security cameras. Nothing but snow and darkness. Chase and Rusty were still out there somewhere. Dawn came slow and gray. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a landscape buried in white. Brenda pulled on her boots and coat, her breath fogging in the freezing air. She had to find them before the authorities did. She stepped outside, calling softly. "Rusty, Chase!" No response, just the wind moving through the pines. Then she heard it, a low, heavy growl. Not from Chase. Something else. Brenda's stomach dropped. She turned toward the sound, her boots crunching through the snow as she moved toward the clearing behind the cabin. That's when she saw them. Rusty was in the middle of the open space, his small orange body stark against the white. Chase stood beside him, his black form massive and alert. And across from them, barely 30 feet away, was a mountain lion. Full-grown, lean, searching for food. Its eyes were locked on Rusty. Mountain lions were common in these mountains, but they rarely came this close to homes, unless they were desperate, unless the storm had driven away their usual prey. The cougar took a step forward. Its muscles rippled beneath tawny fur. It was sizing them up, calculating. Rusty didn't run. He stood his ground, fur puffed, back arched. But against a predator that size, he didn't stand a chance. The mountain lion crouched. And then Chase moved. He didn't roar, didn't charge. He simply placed himself between Rusty and the cougar, his body low, his eyes locked on the threat. The mountain lion hesitated. It had likely never seen a black panther before. Didn't know what it was, but it could sense power, size. For a moment, neither predator moved. Then the cougar lunged. It happened fast. The mountain lion went for Chase's side, striking with full force. Chase twisted, absorbing the impact, and the two of them collided with a force that shook the snow from nearby branches. Brenda screamed, "No!" The fight was intense. The cougar was fast, experienced, driven by hunger. It struck again and again, trying to find an opening. But Chase wasn't attacking to win territory. He was protecting. Every move Chase made was defensive, calculated. He blocked the cougar's attempts to get around him. When it tried to flank, Chase cut it off. When it went high, Chase rose to meet it. He never let it get close to Rusty. The mountain lion landed a solid strike across Chase's shoulder. The fight had taken a heavy toll. He stumbled, but didn't fall. Rusty yowled from behind him, a desperate sound. Chase straightened. His eyes narrowed. And for the first time, he went on the offense. He struck hard and fast, using his size and weight to drive the cougar back. The mountain lion tried to counter, but Chase was relentless. He pushed forward step by step, forcing the cougar toward the tree line. The cougar realized it was outmatched. It hissed once, then turned and bolted into the woods, disappearing between the pines. Chase didn't chase it. He just stood there, sides heaving, the battle leaving him exhausted. Brenda ran forward. "Chase!" He turned toward her, swaying slightly. He was hurt. His breathing was heavy. Rusty was already beside him, pressing his small body against Chase's front leg. He looked up at Chase's face, then gently touched his nose to the panther's jaw. Chase lowered his head, resting it in the snow beside Rusty. Brenda dropped to her knees. "You saved him! You saved him!" Chase's eyes were half closed, exhausted, but still here. Brenda reached out slowly, her hand shaking. She touched Chase's massive head. He didn't pull away. He just closed his eyes completely, his breathing slowing. For a moment, everything was still. Then Brenda heard the engines. Multiple vehicles, moving fast up the mountain road. She looked toward the driveway, and her heart stopped. 3 official trucks, wildlife enforcement logos on the sides, and behind them, a state police vehicle. They'd found him. Doors slammed. Boots hit the ground. Voices barked orders. Chase lifted his head, ears swiveling toward the sound. Rusty stood, positioning himself between Chase and the approaching officials. Brenda rose to her feet, her pulse hammering. "Stay behind me." 6 officers rounded the cabin, moving in formation. 4 of them carried specialized equipment. The lead officer raised his hand. "Miss Jones, step away from the animal." "He's hurt," Brenda said, her voice shaking. "He just fought off a mountain lion. He saved—" "Ma'am, step away now." "He's not dangerous. He's a 200-pound predator who escaped federal containment. We have authorization to secure the target if necessary." Brenda's stomach twisted. Chase struggled to his feet, pain evident in his shoulder. He swayed, weak from the fight, but he didn't back down. Rusty pressed against his front legs, refusing to move. The officers raised their gear. "Last warning, ma'am. Move aside or we will proceed." Brenda spread her arms wide, standing between Chase and the officers. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." The officers tensed, ready to act. Time seemed to slow. And then from somewhere behind the officers, a voice cut through the tension. "Stand down." Everyone froze. The officers lowered their equipment. A woman stepped through the group, her gray hair pulled back, her jacket marked with the Wildlife Conservation Bureau logo. She was older, maybe 60, with sharp eyes that took in the scene in seconds. Chase down in the snow. Rusty pressed against him. Brenda standing between them and the line of officials. "I said stand down," the woman repeated, her voice carrying authority that didn't need volume. The lead officer turned. "Dr. Hartley, this animal is classified as—" "I know what he's classified as." She moved closer, her gaze fixed on Chase. "I also know what just happened here." She gestured toward the tree line where the mountain lion had retreated. Fresh tracks in the snow. Disturbed tracks leading away. The story was written in the clearing for anyone willing to read it. "This panther just defended domestic property from a predator encounter," Dr. Hartley said. "He didn't hunt, he didn't pursue, he protected." She looked at Brenda. "Is that accurate?" Brenda nodded, her voice breaking. "He saved my cat. He saved Rusty." Dr. Hartley crouched, studying Chase from a safe distance. He watched her, but didn't move. Didn't growl. Just stood there, exhausted, with Rusty still tucked against his legs. "How long have they known each other?" she asked. "Since he was 3 months old," Brenda said. "He was fading. Rusty wouldn't leave him. They raised each other." Dr. Hartley was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and pulled out her phone, stepping away to make a call. The officers waited, their posture easing but their attention fixed on the clearing. 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Finally, Dr. Hartley returned. "The final order has been reversed." Brenda's knees nearly gave out. "What?" "Chase is being reclassified under emergency wildlife protocol. Given the documented bond and his non-aggressive behavior toward people, we're approving a protected release." "Release?" Brenda whispered. "You mean—" "There's a wildlife preserve in Montana. 40,000 acres. Monitored but wild. He'll have space, prey, freedom. It's the best option for an animal that can't return to standard captivity, but has shown he can survive independently." Relief and heartbreak hit Brenda at the same time. He'd be free, but he'd be gone. "When?" she managed to ask. "Tomorrow at dawn. We need to tend to his condition first and prepare for transport. You'll have tonight." That final night, Brenda brought them both inside. She cleaned Chase's injuries carefully while he lay on the floor by the fireplace. He was too tired to resist, too worn down from everything he'd been through. Rusty stayed beside his head the entire time, grooming his ears, his face, just like he had when Chase was small. They didn't sleep. None of them did. Brenda sat on the couch, watching them, memorizing the way Rusty curled against Chase's massive chest, the way Chase's paw draped protectively over Rusty's small body, the way they fit together, despite everything that should have kept them apart. By the time the sun started to rise, the transport team was already pulling up the driveway. The goodbye happened in the clearing. Chase walked out on his own, Dr. Hartley guiding him gently towards the specialized trailer. It wasn't a cage, it was open air, designed for dignity, not confinement. Rusty followed to the edge of the porch. He didn't try to go further, like he understood. Chase stopped at the trailer entrance and turned back. His yellow-green eyes found Rusty one last time. Rusty sat down. His tail curled around his paws. He didn't cry, didn't call out. He just watched. Chase held his gaze for a long moment. Then he stepped into the trailer. The door closed. The engine started. Brenda stood beside Rusty, her hand resting on his small head. "He'll be okay," she whispered, as much to herself as to him. "He'll be free." The truck rolled down the driveway, turned onto the mountain road, and began climbing toward the ridgeline. Brenda watched until it disappeared. Rusty stayed at the doorway for a long time after. Not waiting this time. Just remembering. 3 weeks later, Brenda received an email from Dr. Hartley. A video attachment. Surveillance footage from the Montana Preserve. She opened it with shaking hands. The video showed Chase moving through tall grass at dusk. Strong, healthy. His shoulder fully healed. He paused on a ridge overlooking a valley, the sky painted orange and purple behind him. For just a moment, he turned back toward the camera. Then he walked forward into the wilderness and didn't look back again. Brenda closed the laptop, tears streaming down her face. Rusty jumped onto her lap, purring. He settled in, content. He'd done what he set out to do 3 years ago in a snowstorm. He'd kept Chase alive long enough to be free. And sometimes, that's what love looks like. Letting go. So someone else can finally become what they were always meant to be. If this story moved you, if it reminded you what courage really looks like, then I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because stories like this, stories that show the impossible bonds between souls who refuse to give up on each other, these are the stories that matter. And if you don't subscribe, you're going to miss the next one. You'll miss the story that could change how you see the world. You made it this far. Don't walk away now. Subscribe, share, stay, because the next story is already waiting. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss it.